Welcome to another mega exciting Kingscrusher radio show on Tuesday. So 9:10 PM after Holby City, in fact. So I'm timing it a little bit better for you guys. So this week I thought we could look at the Magnus Carlsen versus Sergey Karjakin past encounters. I've got this ancient encounter from 2006. So I think they were both tiny little kids in 2006. There are actually photos of them being rivals since they were little kids as well. So in 2006, this was in the Cap d'Arge, I don't know how that's pronounced, tournament. Cap d'Arge. Yeah, this is a very interesting encounter. Also, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave was in this tournament, back row. Yeah, quite a few players that are now super grandmasters, in fact. So in 2006, Magnus Carlsen against Karjakin in round 2 played against each other. Let's have a look at that game. So e4 for Magnus, who was 2-6-9-8. So they're not weak players back then. They're quite good still. This is 10 years ago. 10 years ago. And Sergey Karjakin was 2-6-7-2. So the ratings weren't too far apart either. These are two players not yet in the 2700 chess club, so to speak, but getting there. Well, Magnus especially only 2 points away. So anyway, Karjakin played the Sicilian defense. I'm hoping there's sound, by the way. There should be. Tell me the sound on Play Chess. Just one moment. Oh dear. Did I not do that properly? Just one moment. That's a downer. Any sound? Sorry. On Play Chess. Carry on. No replies either. Have I really messed that up? I might have to truncate all of this. There's a clear sound. Okay, we can carry on. Thank you. Alright. On Play Chess, if you haven't on the Play Chess server watching this, you need to sometimes press the play button to get it. Okay, so anyway, carrying on. So the Sicilian defense, we have knight f3 now from Magnus, d6. We have an open Sicilian, and here knight c3, a6. Yeah, very exciting scene here. 10 years ago, and now we have bishop e3 for Magnus, e5. Knight goes back. Actually, that's how they get better as well, just in case things get tactical. Bishop e7, bishop c4. So Magnus is clearly eyeing d5, trying to get a grip on the light squares generally here. And what does the live book say? This is a very known position. Black usually castles, white usually castles now. Bishop e6, bishop drops back. To take is a mistake here. If black takes, then that's going to favour white. That d5 square will be a bit looser. White will have some dynamic play. Black doesn't really want to take on b3. The move usually played is knight c6, which was played. We have queen e2, knight a5. Okay, rook fd1. So there's a backward pawn, clearly. And there was also an immediate threat, by the way. Knight takes e5 in this position. So black needs to parry that somehow. But first, knight takes b3. And quite often here, a takes b is played. 51 games in the live book. Magnus varies here a little bit. He goes with where only 10 games. It seems a bit weird to capture away from the centre, but that's what he did. So still we've got this latent threat, knight takes e5 here. This capturing away from the centre does seem interesting here for that c file. What's going to happen there? We have queen e8, parrying that, knight takes e5, getting out of the way. And now knight e1 is played. Now, given a few moves, and there has been Magnus Carlsen games like this where he's actually manoeuvred a knight to d5. I know there's at least one game against John Nunn. You can imagine if he got his own way, maybe he's going to stick a knight on d5 here. But also you can consider strategically bishop g5 is often knocking out the defensive knight, and then you can have more effect when you have an outpost piece there on d5. But it's black's move, and Karjakin strikes out here with an aggressive knight, knight g4. Okay, knight g4. We have knight c2. And of course, to take a mistake is a mistake here, because this would give a very dominating d5 control. Black wants to generate some counterplay. And if he doesn't in time, black could end up just with a very embarrassing one-sided game. So this next move is an attempt to try and drum up some counterplay. Very aggressive f5. And in fact, f4 is a serious concern if followed up with f3. Very serious concern. So here it's partly stopped with f3. Well, it is stopped. Okay, knight takes e3, but we do get these knights looking at d5. So what is going on here? Well, is it that easy to say that white's dominating the d5 square? It looks from one perspective almost as if it is. But what is actually going on here? F takes e4 is played. It would seem Magnus Carlsen would want to just keep an eye on d5 here and play f takes e. This might not be as clear cut as one would like. In this position, let's have a look. Queen c6 with the idea of bishop g5. If we plonk a knight on d5, it's not the end of the world actually, even though aesthetically you might think it should be. This might not be the end of the world, this position here, as an example. Yeah, it might be okay for black. So actually, interestingly, another interesting decision. Instead of marking out d5, Magnus actually plays a move which creates a concrete threat rather than looking pretty on d5. He actually plays knight takes e4, so the concrete threat, knight takes d6 instead. So that's the trade-off here. Knight takes e4, looking at the d6 pawn, that's just humbly protected for the moment. And we get a knight d5 anyway. Black doesn't really want to give up that light square bishop. And instead, black counters with queen f7. So hitting d5. That's supported. So we've got this battle of the d5 outpost here, raging on and on. And in fact, here you'd think, probably in a simplistic way, that simplification should favour white, right? In fact, just to see who's awake or understanding this position at all, I mean, or who can give some guesses, do you think it would be such a bad idea for black to indulge in some simplification here with bishop takes d5? So would you say bishop takes d5 is a good idea with simplification in mind, or not? Because okay, initially you might think there's an outpost, but is there anything else going on in the position which might lead it to be quite good for black here? What do you think about bishop takes d5? What's the opinions here before I show you what actually happened? So black to play. Does black actually want to simplify here, or is that is that pawn too miserable, or what? What do you think? Would you ever play bishop takes d5 here? Basically, yes or no. Bishop takes d5. Any good? Any good? Well, the thing is, you know, chess is not that simple, right? Although it would seem as though there's a terrible backward pawn. You know, in the endgame, you can imagine a king coming here and trying to liberate. If black ever gets a liberation here, he would be creating a pass pawn in the centre, potentially. So this ending might not be as bleak as you think. And in fact, bishop takes d5 was played. Yes, we have this backward pawn, but you know, they could turn into quite an aggressive pass pawn potentially. We have queen takes, rook takes, and the king immediately pops out. The king pops out. It's going to try and liberate black's position. What is it that Steinitz said? Steinitz was #1 in the world on the rating list for quite a long time. There's a fantastic video that demonstrates it. And he said the king can be an aggressive fighting piece. And here, the top priority for black is to liberate the position, to liberate that backward pawn. If the king comes to e6, it's really a fighting piece here. So all is not what it might have seemed from earlier. The pattern of this opening is definitely frequently about the d5 battle, but for black to deliberately simplify here, it's very interesting. A king coming to e6 now. So rook ad1, king e6. Yes, the backward pawn is supported. That's the primary issue. The secondary issue is if we can ever liberate that backward pawn on d6. And remember, white has captured away from the centre here as well. So effectively, that might not be in some ways as good as if the pawn was towards the centre. As an example, if the pawn was here, then we would have c4 and maybe, you know, b4, c5 later. But like this pawn is not going to be having an influence, right, on the backward pawn. So it's an interesting configuration to take account of the little finesses here. We do have b4 being played, and in this position, you know, a surprising little tactical move which shows black isn't so bound up as it would appear. Black cheekily plays now rook c8. What is this? All of white's pieces were seemingly tying black to d6, but of course the d6 pawn cannot be taken here. If knight takes d6, then the king is really aggressive. After rook c d8, it's helping to win material. This is just a winning pin. So that's not on this position. That would just be losing material. So black isn't as tied up as it would seem here. We have b5 being played, and the rook is coming down. Freedom, liberation is being expressed there. Now you might think, well, what about now this d6 pawn? The same kind of situation possibly with the other rook here. If knight this wasn't played, if knight takes, then rook d8 might be okay for black. It's a little bit more complicated, but it might be okay for black. In any case, if this is okay for black. Anyway, that wasn't tested, that forcing sequence. No, instead Magnus he took on a6 and he plays rook a5, releasing the pressure on the backward pawn. But rook b8, black is threatening simply to double, you know, the rooks on the 7th rank. b3, we have rook b6 defending a6 and d6. King f1. Okay, but this isn't entirely easy for black. Black still can't do d5. The bishop's still kind of locked down a bit. Rook bc6. If black could exchange one pair of rooks though, then the king will be able to push through d5. So imagine one pair of rooks come off, then d5 all of a sudden becomes possible, and the bishop will be unleashed. Okay, we have h3, h5, rook d3, g5, clamping down on white's pawns, fixing them a bit more. And now we do get one pair of rooks coming off. If Magnus Carlsen doesn't do this, Black is going to play possibly check at some point, lock down the pawns, and it's not going to be that great anyway. So he actually offers an exchange of rooks, and we do now get this liberation move d5, opening up the bishop, and the pawns are looking very healthy now. Black is doing great here all of a sudden at move 24. Rook a4, and in fact another little tactic from Sergey Karjakin, just hammering home. He's got a really aggressive bishop now, the celebration of the bishop, a5, because if takes, then there's bishop b4. Here, bishop b4. So the bishop is alive and kicking, and already it's like a footballer which has just joined the game and immediately active with a5, demonstrating the power of the bishop now on e7. We have king e2. Bishop d8, the bishop's going to come to this amazing diagonal potentially, which of course classically, as part of the opening, white is strong classically on the light squares and a bit weaker on the dark squares generally in this opening. So black's got that dark square bishop. So rook c1, we have b4, a takes, and now rook g1 hitting these pawns. Not nice. Again, rook g3. Yeah, this is not good, because there's also a pin now. But there's also this pin on f3. It's not nice, this position. e4 check. Rook takes d2. Yeah, black's got the better ending here, for sure, and the more aggressive king. This king's cut off. H takes, e takes f3. Yeah, white is in a bad way. Check. The king can now try and get aggressively into the position. Potentially, if white dared to take here, well, there's also, as well as king e5, there's just hitting this pawn is good. Yeah, white's struggling. He plays rook f5. We have king e6, and now this pawn, we've got two dangerous passed pawns here coming at Magnus Carlsen. Rook f5, d3. Yeah, d3, another nice little shot, because let's see what happens here. King e1 was played. If rook takes f3, then check, and d2 is queening. Yeah, that passed pawn is landing there. So we have king e1 instead, but it doesn't help after check. Move 50 from black. Magnus Carlsen is forced to resign here. It is actually a losing position. If we examine both king moves, if king d1, then f2 wins, with the idea of rook e1 check and then queening. And also conversely, king f1, d2. So it doesn't matter about taking here, because then we just play d1, in fact, mate. So yeah, so all is not what it seems on the chessboard. It seemed as though Magnus has done everything you're classically supposed to do. Get a grip on d5, play against the backward pawn, and Sergey Karjakin got in this, f5 move, which kind of isolated a bit more, white's e-pawn. And the intriguing thing was getting the queens off and getting that king as an aggressive piece earlier. Very easy to underestimate the potential that black's position really had. And in fact, another little feature of that backward pawn that was expressed in this game example is that sometimes it could almost be left because it can carry a nasty backfire pin in those variations. When it was left, then there was a backfire pin. So when we talk about backward pawns, they're not so easy actually to manage as you might think, and this game kind of demonstrates that as well. So in different ways, not just the aggressive king trying to liberate the backward pawn all the time, but the fact that the rooks behind it could come under a backfire tactic, creating a nasty pin. But it was a very dynamic game, aggressive, from Sergey Karjakin, and this was, I think, their first decisive encounter. So this is like 10 years ago. So did you get anything from this game? I hope some of you got something from that game. It shows that the Sicilian defence it might look passive sometimes, but it has got some dynamic potential. So okay, let's have a look at another game I was checking on the early decisive encounters. Believe it or not, this next game is blindfold. Both players were blindfold in 2007. Bilbao blindfold, Chess World Cup in Spain. But you might think, oh, blindfold, is this going to be like an incredibly weakly played game? Not necessarily, because grandmasters, and this has been documented, they can actually calculate variations without having to see the board. They can be walking away from the board and still calculating variations. So they're very well versed, a lot of them, just not even needing a board. Quite an incredible thing, you'd think. But so this is definitely this is blindfold. So let's have a look. And if you think there's any clear blunders, sure, shout them out. But here in 2007, with Magnus Carlsen white, his rating's officially 2714 now. Sergey Karjakin's 2694. So they've both crept up a bit. Magnus being now in the 2700 club, and Sergey Karjakin getting there. So anyway, we have D5 from Sergey. C4. We have a Slav defense. Magnus plays knight c3, knight f6, and this modest e3 move. On the popularity scale, e3 is second most popular actually. Knight f3 is quite popular as well. It doesn't matter. E6, well trodden, that dreaded triangle, which I think I've been avoiding playing this in my own games, and maybe some of you have in your own games as well. But if you imagine you play dynamic aggressive chess, it can come at a great cost when you play things like the King's Engine or Dutch Defence. Although they can be great fun to play, you can get gigantic disadvantages with such an opening like this. The potential for going wrong is sometimes less. On the other hand, potential for winning might be sometimes less. But okay, what happened? Knight bd7. We have bishop d3. Quite often queen c2 is played here, but we have bishop d3 in this game. D takes. So this is called the semi-Slav, the Moran system. Moran. So bishop takes c4. And black is accelerating a solution for his bishop here with this quick b5. So the bishop is given this fianchetto square. And black's later plan is usually to try and liberate that bishop across the diagonal with c5 at some point. So we have e4. And actually here it does seem quite sharp, the position, because black is not moving his bishop here. The key thing is trying to put some early pressure on the light squares in the center. So we have b4, knight a4, and now quick c5. Before white has a chance to stop any c5 liberation, this is done. So some pressure on e4 here. e5, no problem. d5 square is quite nice for black. Now, black's nearly kind of equalized here in this position. White castles. This is still main book actually though, that they're following in this blindfold game. It's still very, very popular book territory, this position. C takes, rook e1. And even here, this next move, g6, which you might think, hold on a sec, g6? g6, isn't it weakening some dark squares? Might not be a major problem. We do have bishop g5, and now queen a5. Okay, knight d2. So knight c4 might be tempting to play knight c4 here. We have rook c8, which may or may not address knight c4, because if knight c4 is played, isn't that quite dangerous if the black queen is kicked? In fact, knight c4 is played. Now, if the queen did go back humbly, I mean, it can't go back to d8. We take it. It can't go back here because then we play knight d6 check. There is actually a square. I mean, there's queen c7 technically, but it does seem a little bit of a target on the c file to rook c1 simply. So it doesn't seem that appetizing. But even without rook c1, white's still got a strong position with something like this. It looks just scary for black. In fact, Sergey in this blindfold game has another idea, and I've given you far too many clues to ask you, so I'm just going to show you. Instead of moving his queen, rook takes c4 was played as an exchange sacrifice. And what on earth does this do, this exchange sacrifice? What problems does it solve? Well, let's have a look. Bishop takes c4. It has weakened e5 a bit, and the immediate thing black does is try and at least get a pawn for the exchange. Bishop g7, with that pawn being weak, maybe castling first, but I want to take away this pawn. Note also this knight still on the rim. The queen can't take on d4 without losing a4. We have rook c1, so black is at least getting a pawn for the exchange now. And it might be a bad idea for the bishop to humbly retreat in this position, because this not only is a pawn for the exchange, black's pieces are looking pretty good, and the center looks good here. This looks like a very nice position for black. So instead, the game goes a bit crazy. There's a counter exchange sack with rook takes e5. So both sides are not afraid to sacrifice the exchange. Bishop takes e5. And the idea here, queen e2, which not only threatens this but supports bishop b5 check with the king still being in the center. Now a dual purpose move, knight c7 not only defends e5, it defends b5 as well. What a nifty move. Defends b5 as well. But bishop h6 stops black castling. So we're back to square one materially, both sides sacking the exchange. Are we not back to square one? Three minor pieces here, the rook each. The king stuck in the center. Is white more? Is white better, or is white worse? Interesting position. White is pawns down, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, white's actually 2 pawns down. And black plays now bishop d6. Immediately threatening with that, releasing that threat, threatening queen takes a4. So bishop drops back to defend that. But now, does black need to castle? No, not really. Queen f5, he's got quite a few aggressive pieces. These guys are looking pretty menacing on Magnus Carlsen's king. This doesn't look the cleverest start position for white. We have rook d1. And a nifty looking move in this position. Obviously white can't do something like this, well it would seem, because we just play this. But instead king e7 is played, just giving up d4. Okay, it's still a pawn up though. So rook takes d4, rook d8, immediately threatening bishop takes h2 check to pick up the rook. Rook goes back, so black's a pawn up, and all the pieces seem good for Sergey here. Knight d5. With this, knight f4 looks quite juicy, getting some coordinated pressure on g2. And here Magnus goes a little bit crazy. This next move looks absolutely like madness, something we wouldn't normally want to do in principle. G4, yeah, it weakens the diagonal, it weakens key squares. The thing is, does it win the queen or not? Is there something about winning the queen, or has the queen even got e5 here? or some other square. The queen could actually just drop back maybe. But is the idea that, you know, bishop takes d5 to try and win a piece? In fact, knight f4 is played counter-attacking on white's queen. But it seems as though even without knight f4, black can actually do this. Bishop takes d5. Either black can simply play like this, or even better, can actually do even better here, by the way, where bishop takes h2, and if something like this, then rook takes d5 is crushing white, and if king takes, then this is nasty as well, check, and rook takes d5. Yeah, this is not working at all for white, whatever. But knight f4 as well is good, as well as queen f6. On queen e5, this also works as well. It's not a good position for white, basically, but knight f4 is kicking the boot in quite a bit here, just hitting the queen. Magnus has got an excuse. It's a blindfold game. You couldn't see the board. So g takes f5, knight takes e2 check. Now we have bishop a6, threatening the nasty discovered check. King goes out the way. Another pawn bites the dust. Yeah, it's kind of over. Knight g1, threatening mate in 1. That'll be a mate in 1. But it's great vision, because I would have lost track of the position after about 5 moves at the start of this game. So this is at move 31. It's fantastic vision for both players, that's for sure. So knight f3 check, king f2. Knight takes h2. Yes, all the pawns are dropping off. One pawn is taken back, check. But now we've got this great big pass pawn here, outside pass pawn, which has got its final destination supported by the bishop potentially. So it's pushed. That's kicked back there for the moment. That goes behind the pass pawn. White tries to create his own pass pawn. That's taken to slow it down. Now black pushes his pass pawn again, and again, and again, and this one does seem a lot quicker than this one at the moment. Rook h1. We have now the move f6. Which supports this next move, which is king f7, and it's here that white resigns. He actually resigned here. We can't really move this pawn. I mean, black is material upright. If he moves that pawn, we can just snap off here and then take on a6. So that pawn's not going anywhere. And if white doesn't do anything here, let's say white waits around, some sort of waiting move. This kind of thing is nasty. That's not the best waiting move. But let's try another one. I don't know, king f1. It's just pretty bad. In fact, whatever happens, this bishop b7 is pretty bad. You might think, what was f6 about anyway? Why couldn't black take here? Well, it's check. That's one thing. So f6 to move the king is quite nifty. So we could move the king, then threaten to take, and then to b7. We want to get back on that diagonal to queen the pawn. So yeah, it's brilliant stuff for a blindfold game anyway. So this game showed that Karjakin on the black side of the Moran, it isn't too bad actually. He isn't too bad playing the Moran system. And both sides had a willingness to sacrifice the exchange. Black's exchange sack seemed at first sight, I don't know about what you guys think, he was already a pawn up. From one of the features of the opening, he was a pawn up. He sacrificed the exchange and he got even more pressure. So he was the first one to get in an exchange sack. But I guess because it's a blindfold game, I don't really want to talk about it too much. But it was an interesting game, I thought, nevertheless. So Okay, let's go on to another game. The third game that I want to show you this evening. Okay, so this is in Bilbao, Spain, and still part of me. We haven't left the blindfold event, so we're gonna have a look at another blindfold game. Sergey Karjakin playing white this time. So e4, we have the Sicilian defense. Knight f3, knight c6, and Sergey plays an anti-Sveshnikov, which filled me with dread, this bishop b5, because you want to play the Sicilian Sveshnikov sometimes, and white plays this, and it changes the whole nature of the position. So e6, white just takes that. It's more closed now, less tactical. D3, so Sergey is playing very positionally against the structure. Knight e7, we have queen e2, queen c7, and now this gets very aggressive immediately. Now white lashes out here. He's prompted to lash out, it seems, with knight g5. Yeah, before casting or anything, knight g5. Magnus plays e5, and if you've seen example games in this line where white's doubled the pawns on c6, quite often you'll notice white has actually quite intense dark square pressure. There's a lot of games where queen coming to c3 in some games, but basically the pressure points on e5 and c5 are stronger than usual for white because of this removal of the c6 knight and double pawns. And in fact, white is trying to accentuate the e5 pressure here with this next move, f4. So almost like King's Gambit style now, or Vienna game. E takes, white castles. So you see, isn't this a little bit of a disaster for Magnus Carlsen here? He's barely developed any pieces, and white's going to get this raging f-file attack, it would seem. Okay, knight g6, wanting to at least get the dark square bishop, right? If bishop takes f4. And in fact, bishop takes f4 wasn't... sorry, that's not on. it's actually protected twice anyway. It's not on. So queen h5 kind of says bishop takes f4 might be on now because we got tactics now on f7 anyway. D6. So bishop takes f4, and black does grab the dark square bishop, but does seem as though is this one of this is Magnus Carlsen in a blindfold game in 2007 playing this kind of sort of highly provocative style, which we have seen in his later example games, where he seems like massively behind in development here. Only his queen's off the first rank. White seems to have a lot of pressure on f7. Okay, these guys are not in the attack yet, but black does have the bishop pair. Can black really survive the immediate short-term pressure in this position? I mean, if I asked you the question, who would you prefer here? Do you prefer white or black at this point? It's black to move. So just as a recap, so Sergey Karjakin with the white pieces has played very energetically, but has made a theoretical concession of losing both bishops. It's two knights versus the two bishops, but does black survive in the short term this f-file pressure? Who do you prefer, white or black then? So a couple of you on stream have said white. Yeah, there's something there's something very interesting tactically about this position. Almost magical how black could potentially untangle and energize from this seemingly dire passive state here, believe it or not. Almost a Houdini act, and it made it even more incredible the fact that this is a blindfold game. But black calmly says to white, go on, keep trebling on f7. He plays g6, and clearly the queen can go to f3 now, so we've got treble trouble on f7. Sorry, the guy in the Big Bang Theory that can't say things, I'm just reminded of him. Trouble on f7. We've got treble trouble on f7. Anyway, no, how does black parry this treble trouble on f7? Now I can say it, treble trouble on f7. I don't know, how does black parry this? Isn't he done for? If black plays like f5, aren't we just going to rip black to shreds? You know, we're going to take and we're going to use this diagonal. But Magnus Carlsen plays a very Magnus Carlsen-y move here, which actually the engine really likes as well in this position. So black to play. Can you guess black's move in this position? Black to play. What does black play in this position? Okay, bishop e6 is a good try, but it's actually, according to the engine, a clear advantage for white. I kid you not, Magnus played the top engine move in this position, which is not bishop e6. This is no joke. If knight takes e6, apparently this is good for white, this position here. You might not think, well, isn't black like, say, castling? If we get this pin, this is good for white. White will have things like queen g4 coming up, or queen h3. Although it might seem desirable for black to castle queenside, in fact Magnus plays bishop g7. Yeah, bishop g7. And after rook takes f7, now has this check to get out of the double attack with tempo, and this is really Houdini type moves. Magnus plays like the only move, it seems, in this position to hold on here. He plays actually queen d8. Yeah, it's necessary to be careful here. If say queen b6, well, this is going to be a disaster with knight c4 anyway coming up. Okay, so queen d8 keeps some pressure on. Queen takes g5 is on the cards. Bishop takes b2 is on the cards. We have c3. Queen takes g5 might have been interesting, as well as what was played though. Bishop e5. We have now rook g7 concretely threatening the mate in one. Remember, if we try and play a tricky move like this, then actually just rook takes defends the mate in one. So yeah, rook g7 is probably the better way to go. If we try it like this, that defends the mate in one, by the way. Yeah, these clever tricks don't work. So if we play like this to do that, then there's queen f6. So anyway, so rook g7, but nevertheless there's still queen f6 here defending the mate in one, and black's in the driving seat after queen f6. Perhaps this is a mistake. Rook g7. Perhaps it was a mistake to actually play this for the mate in one here. White's not developed yet on the queen side, perhaps supporting the knight is a little bit better. And if h6, then this is maybe an upgrade on the game, because g6 is weaker here than it was. This could be a legitimate upgrade to the game path. Nevertheless, okay, in the game path though, rook g7 was played. Let's not scrutinize it too much, it was a blindfold game. So queen f6 takes, and yeah, rook takes h7, but black has a really nifty, embarrassing move for white here, which guarantees him a massive advantage. Black to play. What does black play in this position? And unfortunately, white's pieces are kind of hanging after this next move. Black to play. Any ideas? So what would you play in this position? There is a legal move which is really good. Yeah, someone's mentioned it. So just castle, because the king is now putting some pressure for winning material. You know, bishop takes and king takes. Yeah, white's just losing a piece here. He's losing a piece. Oh dear. You know, you give Magnus a few moves, all his pieces are on the first rank, and you're not losing a piece. It's horrific, isn't it? Nightmare on Elm Street. You wouldn't have thought this would happen, you know? What happens? All of black's pieces all of a sudden also look very keen and energetic as well. But, you know, white is losing a piece. If, you know, the knight moves, we just take the rook. If the rook moves, we just take the knight. That's basically it. Yeah. So knight a3. At least, yeah, opening up the rook. Okay, now we're threatening this. The rook moves to c7. It's kind of all over. This is a decisive advantage to Magnus Carlsen now, obviously, in theory. In practice, okay, rook f7 takes. Bishop f4, so converging maybe on h2 soon, you know, for g3, bishop g3. Knight c4 is played, trying to counter-attack on d6, so bishop d7 kicking that rook, and now bishop b5, annoying, taking out any problem on d6. Rook h7 would be a reasonable move here, of course, but first bishop e5 was played, another one. Black's a bishop up. He doesn't have to like play perfect moves or anything. He's a bishop up. It's going to tell at some point or another. Bishop up in the center, beautiful post. It's all over really in this game. Okay, threatening mate. Rook's coming down. Yeah, white's falling to bits. Bishop d4. Rook takes a2, threatening to mate like this. Yep. Doesn't matter about the bishop because we've got rook f1 there, checkmate. So black is still threatening this. Check, check, king goes here. And here white resigned. Okay, this is just a blindfold game. Or maybe you should like consider that you know, maybe they can play better when they see the board. So, but it was still, I don't know, quite interesting, I thought. So in this game we saw Sergey Karjakin playing, trying to play positionally, not allowing Sveshnikov, but steering the game into more positional waters and trying to accentuate e5 pressure. What would seem to be a theoretical concession given to black in having the two bishops was very energetically used by Magnus with this calm stuff, bishop g7, bishop d4, and the queen going back to d8. These backward moves are just, I don't know, quite difficult to calculate, but very, very effective. Sometimes one of the key defensive things you can do when under pressure is simply try and gobble up the attacking pieces, and that would seem to be, this game is saying that you've got to be careful when you go on the attack, on what seems to be an exciting attack, that simply your pieces are not going to be hanging as a result. Fundamentally, with black having the bishop pair, the bishop is quite dangerous sometimes, but very aggressive, dynamic explosion of activity of the black pieces here. But there were improvements white could have made. As mentioned, there was a key improvement of just supporting the knight. This rook g7, I think, was a key blunder when it was played. So that was a key moment when rook g7 was played. White started to slip, and Magnus won a piece. So these are early fun encounters of these two. I don't want to. I think we'll end there, and I might do another 3 decisive encounters next week. So if you like this session and got something from it, please do like the video, and I'll carry on next week on the next 3 decisive encounters from a historical perspective. So I hope you got something from these, and see you next week. Comments or questions on YouTube, and remember to like the video. Okay, so thanks for coming. Remember to like is appreciated. All right, cheers then.